You think you know your own mind. You think your own thoughts are directly available to you. But what if you're wrong? What if awareness of anything isn't direct? In 1868, Charles Sanders Peirce wrote, quote, "We have no power of intuition, but every cognition is determined logically by previous cognitions." End quote. That sounds radical. So how does he argue for it? Let's reconstruct the case. The argument against intuition. Peirce defines intuition precisely as a cognition not determined by a previous cognition. In other words, a thought that appears independently without inference. Now here's his argument. Step 1. All cognition takes time. He notes that mental events occur in temporal sequence. If a cognition were truly immediate, not determined by prior cognition, it would have to arise without temporal mediation. But in actual experience, every thought is connected to prior thoughts. We never catch a cognition that appears independently. Instead, each thought grows out of a previous one. Step 2. The feeling of immediacy proves nothing. Peirce points out that just because something feels immediate doesn't mean it's non-inferential. He writes, quote, "that a cognition is immediate is not a fact of which we can be conscious." End quote. Why? Because to know a cognition is immediate would require comparing it to something prior. But that comparison itself would be another cognition. So the claim, quote, "this is intuitive," end quote, cannot be verified without circularity. Step 3. Perception itself shows mediation. Peirce argues that perception already involves interpretation. We don't experience isolated sense data. We experience structured judgments. There is a chair. That is red. These are propositional in form. If perception were purely intuitive, it wouldn't have conceptual structure. Therefore, even perception is inferential. Conclusion? Quote, "every cognition is determined logically by previous cognitions." End quote. Intuition collapses. The argument against introspection. So intuition of the outside world is a myth. But what about the inside? Now Peirce turns to introspection. Do we have direct knowledge of our internal states? He says no, and his argument is surprisingly empirical. Argument 1. Developmental evidence. Peirce observes that children do not begin life with clear awareness of their inner states. Self-consciousness develops gradually. If introspection were a primitive faculty, it would appear immediately. Instead, awareness of self grows through interaction with others and the world. So self-knowledge is learned. Argument 2. Error about our own mental states. We often misinterpret our own motives. We think we act from reason, but later discover emotional causes. If introspection were direct perception, it wouldn't be so frequently mistaken. Instead, we hypothesize about our own states. Peirce writes, quote, "all knowledge of the internal world is derived by hypothetical reasoning from our knowledge of external facts." End quote. You infer your anger from your raised voice. You infer belief from your actions. You know yourself the exact same way you know others. Argument 3. No special faculty needed. Peirce asks, why posit a special magical inner sense when the same inferential mechanisms explain self-knowledge? If outward behavior allows inference about others, it can explain inward awareness too. Introspection becomes unnecessary. We cannot think without signs. Now this is foundational. Peirce states, quote, "we have no power of thinking without signs." End quote. His argument is, thought has structure, structure requires representation, representation requires signs. When you think of a tree, you might use an image in your head, the spoken word tree, or even a botanical concept. All of these are signs. You don't have an actual tree inside your brain. Even the most private thought is symbolic. If there were non-sign thought, it would be unstructured and inaccessible. but every thought we can actually reflect on has sign character. Therefore, all thinking is mediated, and mediation eliminates intuition. The positive picture. Experience and secondness. You see, Peirce is not denying reality. He's denying immediate certainty. Experience, he says, forces belief revision. When expectation fails, we feel resistance. That resistance is not chosen, it interrupts thought. This interruption generates doubt, doubt leads to inquiry, inquiry leads to new belief. Reality is what produces stable constraints over time, not what is intuited. Escaping skepticism. The skeptic says, if you can't know immediately, you can't know at all. Peirce rejects that standard. He replaces absolute certainty with fallibilism. Truth is not what is indubitable. Truth is what would survive unlimited investigation. He writes in this period, quote, "We cannot begin with complete doubt," end quote. Doubt must be genuine, arising from real disruption. Radical Cartesian doubt is artificial. Inquiry always starts from lived belief. So skepticism fails because it misunderstands how cognition actually works. In summary, Peirce argues we cannot verify immediacy, so intuition fails. Self-knowledge develops inferentially, so introspection fails. All thought requires signs, so mediation is universal. Experience constrains belief, so realism survives. Certainty is unnecessary, so skepticism collapses. What epistemic picture do we end up with? No intuition, no introspection, no raw foundations. Only interpretation constrained by reality.